Hi, I'm Paul.
I'm Paul too.
Well, and welcome to Better Call Paul's, the absolutely dumbest name for any video program that's ever been on the internet, but it is a show that's deceptively intelligent if you look behind the title. So like they say, don't judge a book by its cover. Tonight, we're going to be talking about weed, marijuana, grass, mota, all the good names for a drug that has been used for thousands of years and has been illegal for a fraction of that time, resulting in a drug policy. If you ever wanted to know why America's 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated, look directly to drug policy. It has a nice illustrious racist history, all the way dating back from the Harrison Act in 1914 till today. Part of those of the development of our drug policy goes back also to the 30s, where we decided that Mexican Americans were good enough to clean our toilets and mow our yards, but when we needed a reason to boot them back across the border, we found the evil marijuana at the source of that. And so tonight's episode, for lack of a better word, is Don't Step on the Grass, Sam. That's a nod to a Steppenwolf song of the late 1960s, early 70s. And the Sam in that song being Uncle Sam. And it was the first song that I recall really documenting the futility and stupidity of U.S. drug policy, particularly against cannabis. A couple of more tidbits of information you should know about cannabis before we proceed. It is a Schedule I narcotic, according to the United States government, which means it is not recognized as having any legitimate medicinal use. Now, this is despite the fact that there's a growing body of research that indeed suggests that it has tremendous medicinal use, particularly CBDs that are extracted from cannabis are used very effectively on epileptics, seizure-type disorders, particularly in young children that can't tolerate other drugs that are intended for that, and has shown almost miraculous results for some of them. There's indications that it may be helpful with glaucoma. There's indications that it may be helpful indeed for a lot of things, including helping chemotherapy patients tolerate the harshness of those drugs without becoming malnourished and dying from the drugs they're being given to treat the cancer. Despite all this, we've only had, we've had Washington State, Colorado, Alaska, and the District of Columbia has legalized, and other 17 states have decriminalized marijuana, made it available for, and some making it available for medicinal use. But still, we have a 1950s mentality guiding a drug policy that is resulting in literally rivers of blood on our borders. I can say this is somebody that lives literally a few hours drive from a combat zone on the Mexican-American border, where people are dying in droves. All of it because we insist on keeping drugs illegal. And so as two addictions counselors, Paul Beatty and I, are going to be discussing that. And normally you would expect people that work with drug addicts to be saying, oh, no, reefer madness, quit, don't do that, whatever you do, it'll turn you into a fucking werewolf. It actually doesn't, and we need to talk about that. We need to talk about a more sane drug policy. And how, may you ask, does this relate to men's issues? Well, take a look at the prisons, guys. 90% of people in there for nonviolent drug offenses are men. Women get the P pass, men get the bars. That's the way it works. So with that, I want to first turn it over to Paul, get sort of your thoughts on what I just said. Am I full of shit or am I speaking the truth, brother?
Oh, you're always speaking the truth, Paul. This story was similar in Australia. As there was a big reefer madness. You'll turn into a sex-crazed maniac if you smoke weed. It was banned in 1938. It's a prohibited substance, which means you can't use it for medicinal purposes. There are some trials that are being talked about that are happening in some states where really to do with terminal cancer sufferers, though. So it's not widespread use. I'd say it affects the men's issue here would be it's easy for an allegation of drug use to be used in family court proceedings, which is never a good look for the father. It's illegal in Australia. It's probably criminalized, but so that means you get an on-the-spot fine up to, well, in New South Wales, up on-the-spot fine up to 2 times, and perhaps a caution. It's all discretionary. But then you're looking at possibly a conviction. One of the strange anomalies we have in New South Wales is that it's done by weight, and it's the weight of the overall substance. So if you're using edibles like a brownie or a cake, it's the weight of the cake that's important. So if there's a personal sort of caution for 15 grams or half an ounce, and your cake weighs a kilo, doesn't matter how much cannabis is in it. You've got a kilo of drugs, man.
Oh, edible users, by the way, there's a good sign right there. Stay the fuck away from pound cake, okay? That could be a felony.
But it's interesting, you know, as drug and alcohol counsellors, I guess we're expected to say drugs are bad, okay? But you need a counsellor when you have a problem, and there are many people that use drugs, that includes alcohol and tobacco in that very firmly, that don't have any problem at all. It's just a recreational use. Sometimes it's used for medicinal purposes. Sometimes it's just used for fun. And when it's just used for fun and no harm's done, then I don't think there's a big concern, really.
Well, you know, that does bring something to mind, you know, as somebody that has been involved in working with addicts for a really long time now. I look at pharmacology and effects. I know this is sacrilege in the treatment community, who believes that anybody that ever took a puff off of a joint or had one too many drinks is an alcoholic and an addict. But the fact of the matter is that I look at consequences. That's one of the diagnostic criteria is, you know, do you continue the use of drug past life-damaging consequences? And when you look from a pharmacological standpoint, people who smoke cigarettes have a much bigger drug problem than most people who smoke marijuana. Now, that's not to say that you can't have a problem with marijuana. You certainly can. If you're waking up every morning and firing up a joint before you get out of bed, and you smoke all day, day in and day out, and you can't imagine changing a flat tire or watching a movie or having something to eat without having a joint, then that's what I would qualify as a problem. But I got to tell you, Paul, I was really disheartened by all the times in treatment that I had guys that, and I remember one guy, and I'm figuratively giving him a fake name for this thing. We're just going to call him JJ. JJ came into my office. He was an employee of, at the time, Southwestern Bell Telephone Company. Very large company. He was a family man, happened to be African American, had 4 children, owned his own home, had been very successful at what he did, had moved up all the way to a foreman position, which is a pretty well-paid, respected position within that field. And one weekend at a party, somebody was passing a joint, and he took a couple of hits off of it. He wasn't even a regular pot smoker, didn't drink at all. But he got caught up in a social situation. Somebody passed a joint, and he said, what the heck, I'll take a couple of puffs. Well, guess what? The following Monday at work, random drug screen comes along, and they pop him for having THC. So many parts per million gives you a positive. So next thing you know, company policy is that he has to get treatment or be fired. He ends up in my office. He explains his drug history. I gave him a SASI, which is a substance abuse subtle screening inventory. He scored extremely low on that. I went and talked to his family members. I talked to his children. I talked to everybody I could. This guy did not have a drug problem. He did not belong in a treatment center, yet there he was having to be one to keep his job. So what I had to do was to say, JJ, here's the deal. You're a drug addict, and you can't repeat what I'm going to tell you, because I know you're not a drug addict. I know it's all bullshit. I know all of this is bullshit. You have no business here. But if you say you're not a drug addict, you're going to lose your job. If you don't follow the treatment regime here, you're going to lose your job, which means you're going to have to go to 12-step meetings at Narcotics Anonymous. You're going to have to tell everybody in a room that you're a drug addict. You're going to have to get up and pick up a desire chip to quit using a drug that you've never really abused. And you're going to have to pretend that you're a dope fiend to get through this and keep your job. That's going to have to be maintained all the way through family week. When you bring your family members in here, and we have to try to get them to talk about all the crazy things you did when you were fucked up, and they're not going to have anything to say. So we're going to have to really put together a good story and fake this whole thing. And the guy started shedding tears. I mean, if you can imagine what that's like, that he took a couple of puffs off of a joint, and the next thing you know, literally, his life was turned upside down. He was having to lie to everybody about being a drug addict. This guy was a straight up blue collar hero. He worked his butt off every day. He paid for his home, and there he was sitting in a treatment center. This is only a small fraction of what's wrong with drug policy, because he could have just as well been sitting in a jail if the cops had been on that scene. In Texas, they used to give 2 years to life for possession of any amount of marijuana. My father worked for the correction system and told me about all the guys in there, and they were all black. Every last one of them, black and Hispanic, were doing 20, 30, 35 years for possession of a joint in prison. Longer sentences than a lot of people got for murder. Now, it's improved somewhat since then. They've actually started arresting a few white people, which is probably why that they have lowered the penalties on it substantially. But it's still a mandatory arrest in Texas. You go to jail if you have so much as a seed, you go to jail. But in the treatment industry, we have a lot of professionals that are saying, yeah, bring them on in. Anybody that got caught with a dirty drug urine, don't ask the circumstances, don't ask anything, just come in and then start hammering them. And if this guy would have had another counselor other than me, it would be very likely that he would have spent 28 days in treatment with somebody hammering on him about his denial of being a drug addict and shaming and ridiculing him for not getting with the program and admitting his problem. That, to me, is a Kafkaesque nightmare all by itself, and yet that's what we're doing. Is it anywhere near the same thing like that going on down under there, brother?
Yeah, it is. I've got I know a very similar story for a friend of mine that I'll call him JJ as well. Let's just say he flew over here and.
Man, what is it with JJ? Hey, if your name is JJ, change your fucking name, okay? You won't get arrested.
Well, we don't have such niceties as a Fourth Amendment here. So the police have got they've got very much greater stop and search powers than they do in America. And sniffer dogs are permitted at various places, including bars, train stations, music festivals. And these little things only need to give a little indication. I've been searched a few times when I've had nothing on me, but there's not a lot you can do about it. But I know someone who was carrying, jump through, and this guy was in his 50s. He's in his 50s. He's got a family. He's got a good job. Travels with work, and he had to jump through so many legal hurdles to make sure that a conviction was not recorded, which is called a Section 10 in Australia. If he hadn't have done that, he would have lost his job, because traveling, when you have and this is the thing about criminalizing the whole drug. The whole drug situation is, once you have that conviction, it's very difficult to be employed, and so you've got the double whammy. You've got possibly you might serve a custodial sentence, then when you get out, you can't get a job. What are you going to do? And this is something that people don't realize. What you're talking about, the pharmacology aspects, we know through countless studies what effect on average alcohol has on a person, particularly with their ability to drive. Some places vary between 0.05 and 0.08, whatever the limits are. But with any other substance, and specifically THC, we don't know what is a safe amount, what is not a safe amount. It hangs in your system longer. And so it's an all or nothing approach. And again, in Australia, our drink driving, our checkpoints or our RBTs, You cannot refuse. You have to be breathalyzed, and you have to have a swab test. You have to submit to a swab test as well. And if there's any trace, then you're DUI. But no one really knows what the safe limits are. It's just all or nothing. It's ridiculous.
And let's expand on that a little bit, because this is an important thing. But first, I want to ask a question just to clarify. You mean that in Australia, you can be sitting in a pub somewhere just having a beer and the police can walk in with dogs? I mean, and I'm sorry to say this, but like Nazis looking for Jews and turn them loose on law-abiding citizens with no probable cause for search?
No probable cause. And the last time I saw this was a few months ago, just sitting with a few friends. I don't even drink, you know. I didn't have anything on me. None of my friends did. But when the police walk in with those dogs, it fucks up the atmosphere. And they come in and they it's like, what the fucking right have you got to do to come in here with your dog? And they grabbed one of my mates and searched him outside the pub. He had nothing. But it's ridiculous. Yeah, no, you've got far greater to be able to question that sort of behavior than we have.
Oh, and I'm sure that has eradicated the drug problem in Australia 100% by doing
Of course it has. Yeah, that's it. We're just drinking water. That's it.
Yes, that's it, because I mean, God knows if you step on people's rights enough, the substances won't be an issue. Of course, what a load of hogwash. Well, I tell you what, I do feel thankful that at least here, they have to have a reason to search you. And if they overstep that, then whatever they find is going to get thrown out of court and you're not going to be convicted on it.
Yeah, here it's not the same as probable cause. It's reasonable suspicion, which is, you know,
which is reasonable in the mind of the guy doing the search, right?
Yeah. If you're wearing a Jimi Hendrix t-shirt, you're probably knackered for a start, you know.
Well, man, I've got a couple of those. So when I come to visit you down under, I will leave Jimmy at home. Good Lord. I'll leave all my Second Amendment t-shirts at home too. I don't think they'll like the ones with the 45 autos up front on the chest very much. That's probably not going to be popular down there. But here we're talking about a drug pharmacologically. And again, here's another part of the problem. Because marijuana is a Schedule I, cannabis is a Schedule I substance in the United States, it means it is very, very difficult to get research done on it, even for medicinal reasons. There has been a lot of circumstantial evidence to point to cannabis being a very, very effective treatment for a number of diseases, everything from problems of the eye, glaucoma, seizure disorders, chemotherapy, I mean, you name it. There is a positive inference about cannabis on many of those problems. Doesn't mean that there's empirical evidence that it cures anything, and I'm not trying to assert that, but there are plenty of reasons that we should be doing really, really aggressive research on cannabis for its medicinal properties, yet that can't happen because we have idiots running drug policy. I mean, can you imagine the United States uses the word czar for their high-ranking drug officials, the drug czar? Where's the last country you heard the term czar come from? Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, old Soviet Union. That is amazing. And then we have idiots. I was going to bring this up tonight too, and I wanted to get your reaction to it, Paul. A few years ago, I was listening to Tammy Bruce on the radio. She is a lesbian, reformed lesbian feminist that's now come out speaking more conservatively about issues and sort of anti-feminist in some of her rhetoric, pro-feminist in others. But anyway, she's become sort of a darling of American media when it comes to political issues and things like that. Well, she was doing a program on marijuana and medical marijuana where she was, you know, doing sound gags like honking horns and stuff like that, making fun of people who were looking for cannabis to relieve the symptoms of chemotherapy. And I called up her show and said, you know, I'm a long-term addictions counselor. I'm not a pro-drug advocate. I'm not certainly not a pro-drug use advocate, but I am telling you that there are a lot of people that I would advocate for having access to cannabis during the course of cancer treatments. And her response was, well, I bet you would, honk, honk, honk. And then she hung up on me. This is the kind of mentality. We have another woman here in the United States named Calvina Fay, who's the is or was, I assume she still is, the head of the Partnership for a Drug-Free America. I met her once here in Houston at Brown and Root to try to discuss with her some more sane ideas about our approach to drug addiction. And you could tell this woman just had this telephone pole lodged up her ass. And her, I mean, no affect, no nothing. And you get this from a lot of like super control freaks. They don't have any facial expressions. There's no smiles. There's no frowns. There's just this, you know, she could be on The Walking Dead if her skin was sagging a little bit more. But she said the only place for people who use drugs is prison. And you could have put a fucking pull cord in the back of her neck. And I talked to her for 45 minutes. And that's all she said. Over and over again. This is who we have as the voice of drug policy in the United States. And it makes me really afraid that we're never going to bring sanity to this discussion.
No, it's very polarized in Australia too. And I guess the conservative side of it is very much like that. It's just a complete dogmatic, all drugs are wrong under any circumstances. This is why they're having a little brandy, probably a brandy.
Yes, exactly.
And it's, you know, I mean, study after study on different substances. I'm looking at one from the Lancet, 2012, where, you know, these doctors are suggesting that drug policy should be formed on harm. How much harm does each of these substances do, both to a user or to the people around them that are affected by their use? And alcohol comes out at number one by a huge amount, a huge margin over heroin, crack cocaine, methamphetamine, cocaine, tobacco, amphetamine. Then we get to cannabis. Right, it's right down the list. And then you can go even further, right the way down to, you know, the psychedelics and hallucinogenics, which, you know, are very unlikely to cause someone trauma. I mean, they were used in treating trauma and PTSD and all sorts of different psychological effects, but that's kind of gone out the window. So I don't really see a wind of change here. We have a similar system where if you have the cautions, you have to then go to counseling or, you know, drug rehabilitation. And if people don't get someone such as yourself, then they have to basically lie. So, yeah, I've got a problem. I understand it was a problem, but I'm okay now. And that's the way you can get off. And that's it. And the whole thing is based around one thing that I think might change is I'm hoping that people will see what happened in Colorado. Primarily what I'm thinking of there is the taxes raised. Because at the moment, you're taxing drugs by cautioning people with parking fine tickets. And then but then you're losing that money by sticking people in jail if they've been cautioned too many times. When they look at Colorado, it's raising. I think I'm right in saying this. I heard that it's raised more tax through marijuana than alcohol for the first time now.
Yes, it has $600 million in the first full year of cannabis legalization is the tax revenue for Colorado. Then you have to also consider the 400 some odd million dollars they did not spend arresting, prosecuting, and incarcerating people for the same crime. So we're talking about $1 billion net profit from changing one law, and nobody still has overdosed on marijuana because it does not have an LD50. For those of you that don't know, an LD50 is an amount of a drug that will be lethal LD stands for lethal dose, in 50% of the population. Every drug known to man has one except one. And that happens to be cannabis. You would have to eat enough raw cannabis for the sticks and twigs to tear your intestinal tract up and kill you that way, but you would not die from an overdose of THC.
Unless you're a journalist on a fact-finding mission to Colorado that eats a few too many bars of chocolates, and then you might think you're going to have a major problem, but you're not in reality going to have a problem. So,
absolutely. What they've also found, I want to include this in this, is people that suffer anxiety disorders, that there are strains of marijuana that have a very profound positive impact on anxiety. And they're also finding this to be true of CBD. CBDs, as opposed to THC, by the way, doesn't get you high. It is just, it's one of the oils that they're giving young children with seizure disorders. It doesn't make them high, it just stops seizures. It also has the effect of an anxiolytic effect of reducing anxiety in adults who use either CBDs or THC of the right strain of marijuana. And listen, folks, chronic anxiety is a bitch. It is a terrible, terrible deal to deal with. If you wake up every day with a racing pulse, every day with a sense of impending doom, sweaty palms, symptoms of heart attacks, that stuff wears people down to the point of suicide. And you can give them drugs like alprazolam, which is Xanax, and they will eventually become addicted to it. The withdrawal from Xanax can kill you. Or you have the option, if you're lucky enough to live in a state like Washington or Colorado or Alaska, where you can actually just buy the medicine that will treat it without physical dependency, without the risk of withdrawal. Yet in most places still, the states are having no part of it. I do think, though, that they are starting to catch on to the revenue aspect of it.
That's the thing. That's the thing. It doesn't matter who you are. When you see that money, your morals, oh, well, we've done small studies on the thing, and maybe, because it's a lot of money that governments can get out of this shit. A lot.
Yep. You have to wonder how many governors are starting to seeing the wisdom of legalized cannabis when they start getting financial reports on their desks that say, look at what we're spending, look at what we could be making. And it's not effectively hurting anybody. And by the way, for those of you out there that are throwing conniption fits, saying, oh no, marijuana is the gateway drug. Bullshit. You don't know what you're talking about. I got news for you. Tobacco and alcohol are the gateway drugs. If you want to know what a gateway drug is, look to Philip Morris. Look to any manufacturer of hard liquor. And how do we know what a gateway drug is? We do drug histories on drug addicts, and we go back, what's the first mind-altering substance you use? Almost every time it's alcohol and tobacco, not marijuana. Now, marijuana plays in there at some point, but the gateway drugs are the drugs that are legal and killing the most people. So you tell me what makes sense.
That's something that's always dumbfounded me, Paul, is the way that marijuana is talked about as the gateway drug, and they always skip over alcohol and tobacco. And in my experience, I've never come across anyone that's had, I'm talking about people with drug problems, that has never had a drink or a cigarette. Most of them smoke. I mean, the amount of cigarette instances with drug use is tremendously high. But also alcohol is one of those substances. It's much more conducive. If someone's inebriated under alcohol and they're offered a pill, they're just probably, just take it. Whereas if someone's stoned, they're probably good and are not going to be as open to taking some pill that they don't know what's in it in the first place. But the attitude here is the gateway drug. And also we have some of the most lax licensing laws that I know of in the world. In Sydney, there's such a thing. There's 24-hour bars, so you can legally go out and get to the point of death. Well, in fact, no, legally you can get to the point of death. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. You can go out, you can stagger down the street, and so long as you don't smash anything up, you can do that perfectly legally. Go home and do it again the next night, or when you wake up, because the bar's always open. And the amount of violence that that's prevalent in these areas where they have 24-hour pubs. So some of them, it's just, it's something that you do not get with marijuana, even heavy marijuana use. People just do not kick the shit out of each other when they're stoned.
Oh, no, they certainly don't. Alcohol is a disinhibitor, and that means a lot of things. It means you're more prone to have sex. It means you're more prone to have arguments. And yes, you're more prone to violence. Marijuana, when it comes to violence, has the opposite effect on people. They tend to be more peaceful, more quiet, reserved. When's the last time you saw somebody smoke a joint and then punch somebody in the bar because they didn't like their face? I mean, it just doesn't happen that way. The problem here is a huge amount of collective ignorance and Puritanism. I'll go with the Puritanism even more than the ignorance. There are people out there, lots of them, a lot of our politicians and a lot of our population that just say, well, I just don't like the idea of somebody getting high. Well, tough shit. People have been getting high since they figured out how to do it thousands of years ago. I mean, they've been brewing beer and making spirits and smoking marijuana for thousands of years. And our drug policy here in the West, in modern times, is not going to stop that from happening. All we're doing is creating a prison complex that is just stacking nonviolent people in prison cells with violent people, where guess what? They learn to become violent. If you want somebody to learn to become violent, don't give them marijuana, because that'll be the opposite. You're going to learn how to be violent, imprison them for having marijuana, and they will certainly learn how to be violent. Sometimes it's a matter of survival in prison. This is one of the great nasty secrets. And right now, by the way, I just brought this up on a graphic in a recent video. The Obama administration is budgeted, get this, $16 billion for the war on drugs. That's 16 billion with a B. That's 16 billion that we don't have to spend. That's another 16 to probably 50 billion we could be collecting in tax revenue if we weren't so absolutely ignorant about how to handle drugs. Drugs are a social issue. They can be a social, clinical, psychological problem, but to treat them as a criminal problem is something that men have manufactured on their own. That wasn't, you make drugs expensive, people will steal to get them. You make them expensive, the most efficient way to make them pricey is to make them illegal. So we have given birth to the cartels. We have given birth to gangs on streets selling drugs. We've given birth to old people being beaten up and having their Social Security money robbed and everything else, all because we insist that keeping drugs is a healthy thing for our culture when it is certainly not.
One thing I've noticed that the Puritans play on a lot when they're talking about drugs, or even these. This is a vaporizer, which the liquid in it in Australia cannot contain nicotine. I cannot buy it. I have to import it. But the argument for this, or the argument for marijuana, is what about the children, Paul? If we legalize,
What about the children?
If we legalize this, or we legalize marijuana, then the children are going to be more at risk. I mean, look, if you're a parent and you're giving your kid nicotine or marijuana or alcohol before they've passed adolescence, before their brain is fully formed, you're a fucking idiot no matter what. No one is saying that because we should have a more liberal policy on drugs, that humans that are not formed should be given it. That's fucking ridiculous. But that's what about the children? You'll see children smoking dope. There'll be pot in schools, and that's the sort of thing that they use to resonate with more of the middle ground, I think, than maybe the undecideds. Then they'll think, well, yeah, if it's legalized, it's going to become a fucking, it's going to be drug land out there. And the other thing about the decriminalization of drugs is you're not decriminalizing criminal consequences. So if someone's drunk, or if someone's on drugs and they commit a crime, a violent crime, or a robbery or something, then you still they are still responsible for doing that, and you still bring them in front of the law and punish them for that crime. But to say that smoking a joint is at that part where that criminalisation should start is ridiculous. In Portugal, I think it's about 15 years ago in Portugal, they decriminalised all drugs decriminalised. So again, it's a more of a fine system, but there's no jail. And what they found is initially, because they've had time to study this now, 15 years, there was a spike of drug use immediately afterwards. It's just fallen away. Nothing bad has happened at all. Crime has gone down, violence has gone down. But you know, maybe the rest of the world just looks at it and says, "Oh, well, that's Portugal. It's only a you know, a European country that's at the arse end of Europe or something." I don't know, but that seems to be a good load of empirical evidence that people just ignore.
Well, if you ask some of the idiots in my state, they would say, "Well, those are just glorified Mexicans. What does it matter?" Yeah, I know. We got some.
They can only say Brazilians.
Yeah, but you know, two things. One, I love the battle cry of the idiot. What about the children? I mean, that is designed to evoke an emotional reaction out of people, and to say that, you know, no matter what the problem is, you know, there's too many decals on bumper stickers on cars. What about the children? And then all of a sudden, everybody will automatically, by rote, go out and start ripping bumper stickers off of their cars because somebody said, "What about the children?" They won't think about, well, does this really impact children? I'll give you an example of this. Alcoholism rates in France are remarkably low. A country that ingests more wine probably than any other nation on earth, maybe Italy would be close competition. But you know why that they have so few alcoholics in France? Is because they role model responsible drinking in their families. They role model having one or maybe two glasses of wine in their families, and then more than that is considered socially acceptable. Not that there's no alcoholics in France, but they teach their children responsible ingestion of wine as they're growing up. And they even, as early as 10, 11, 12 years old, will give them small glasses of wine to go with dinner just to taste. But the whole point is, we'll look at it this way. The highest percentage of alcoholics come from two different families. One from families where both parents are total and complete alcoholics, where they drink constantly and they're never sober. The other highest group of producing alcoholics are teetotalers who never drink at all. They don't ever show their kids responsible ingestion of alcohol. So when their kids grow up, turn 18, go to college, they get into an environment where beer and wine and other liquors are everywhere. They don't have any measures. They don't have any guidelines to go by. So they just drink and enjoy. And sure enough, they end up with drinking problems. It's the responsible use of drugs like alcohol and cannabis that can prevent a lot of adult problems with alcoholism and drug addiction. The other thing you were talking about was, what was it? Must be too much cannabis. I'm losing my train of thought here.
Oh, there we go. Oh, this is the downside, isn't it? What was I talking about?
Yes, this is the downside. What is it? Who am I?
What about the children?
Children and
Portugal.
children.
Decriminalisation.
Yes, decriminalization. What you also find, and I read something about Portugal, if you talk to law enforcement in Portugal and ask them if they would like things to go back to the way they were, their answer isn't just no, but hell no. They were sick and tired of getting into sometimes violent situations with citizens on the street for nothing more than drugs, because people are afraid to go to jail. They're afraid to have that on their record. The same thing happened in the Netherlands when they decriminalized drugs there. There was a spike of increase of use, and then it plummeted, literally plummeted down because it was no big deal, and the police didn't have to get involved. One of the things people should know, that, and I highly recommend a book by Stanton Peele called the Stanton Peele, P-E-E-L-E, called The Truth About Addiction and Recovery. And in that, he talks about the fact that, one, treating alcoholism, addiction, and other things is most effective from a community-based standpoint. If you don't criminalize it, and if you bring in people's families, you bring in their church groups, you bring in employers, on the level not of Johnny is the identified problem, but here we've got an individual that's being affected by addiction. And if everybody knows about it, if everybody is supportive toward the idea of recovery, if everybody's making contact with person, they tend to do very well. But when you arrest people and throw them in the system, half the clients I used to see in residential treatment, when I did the assessments, it became a joke with me. One of the first questions I asked them was, well, so when did you get arrested? Because we both know that's why you're here, right? You got a court date coming, and you're in treatment to show the judge that you're serious about getting better. And yeah, it was a lot of them. They got popped for a couple of joints, for some sort of drug. But let's move on and ask another. Let's ask a tougher question, Paul. What about other drugs? What about other drugs? What about like crystal meth? And I mean really some nasty, nasty stuff. Really disgusting drugs. Cocaine is another one. It's a killer. Heroin is not exactly your bed of roses, although people should know that the regulated use of pharmaceutically pure heroin is probably about as safe as marijuana. People don't want to hear that, but if you don't overdose on it, you know your doses. Heroin is a fairly naturally occurring substance, but it is still the source of a lot of crime, a lot of misery, diseases from dirty needles, all kinds of things like that. So I'm not touting heroin use as a good thing to do, but I'm just trying to be realistic about it. But what kind of approach do you think we should take about all the drugs?
Okay, well, this is an interesting one. I think when you're looking at some drugs, and I'm looking again at this Lancet list, and right down the bottom by a long way, things like mushrooms, LSD, ecstasy. So really the main danger that people have from these drugs at the moment is you cannot guarantee what else is in the tablet, and that's the main problem. So without FDA or a government body looking at the quality of these drugs, people are getting harmed that way. So I think if you're looking at harmonization as far as those drugs go, then why not decriminalize them and have some sort of oversight to check on whether they're good or not? I mean, it's a big shift. As far as the other drugs, I mean, methamphetamine is something that I've got real moral problems with. I think it is one of the dirtiest, skankiest, filthiest, most addictive, dangerous drugs going, that it doesn't have to kill you. You know, it's so vicious the way that when you first take it, it starts rotting your guts and it starts rotting your brain. It's horrible, horrible thing. But again, should someone be sent to jail for it? And what is that solving? And I'm not sure it solves anything. I don't know if the act of putting whatever shit. I mean, I've heard what's that one that they've got there? Crocodile, which is a mixture of petrol and fuck knows what. People are so desperate, bath salts, to put any old shit into their system. Should that be illegal? And morally, I'd say I don't like it. I don't agree with it. But that's not the function of law, I don't think. The function of law is to keep us safe to a large extent and not to oppress people. And, you know, the less you oppress people, the more people are going to make some more mistakes. But, you know, I'd rather be on that side of the balance where people are free to fuck up than being treated as if everybody is a potential idiot. You know, most laws come in because to give you, sidetracking here, but to give you an example of how Australian lawmakers generally work is, someone shone one of those laser pointers on a commercial aircraft. Nothing happened. The pilot reported it, and because it was deemed that this was dangerous, they banned all laser pointers over 5 milliwatts in Australia, which, you know, the act of bringing down a plane is, I'm pretty sure that's fucking illegal, but they assume that No, that's not good enough. We have to ban all of these things from the country. So my personal thing is, there's a lot of drugs I really don't like, and I think that if people are taking these drugs, a lot of them do need help, but I don't think the criminal justice system is the way to do that. So I would think decriminalizing them, well, I just don't think that it's a place for law.
Let me throw in my 2 cents on why you couldn't be more correct than you are. And this, again, this reminds me of the point I forgot about earlier, that I had my little cannabis moment and let slip my mind. No, folks, I didn't have a cannabis moment. I'm not high. But if you go back to Stanton Peele's book on addiction and recovery, and he does an analysis of what happened in the Netherlands and other countries that have decriminalized and in some cases legalized. You got to understand that part of an addiction is not just the drug. It is the rituals associated with it. And here, I'll give you an example of that. And it may seem, somewhat trivial, but it's actually a big part of the addictive process. When people buy weed, at least in the old days, before they came out with all these, really high potency sensimias where you don't have seeds in them. But what people used to do was they would, hang out with a friend, then they would go somewhere with friends, and they would buy their bag and they would bring it back and they would crush it up and take a credit card, or if the typical drug addict, their driver's license, because they didn't have credit cards, and they would roll it on a paper until all the seeds roll out and manicure the weed, and then roll it up into joints or put it in a pipe and smoke it. All of those things are social rituals established with the drug. The same thing happens with methamphetamine. The same thing happens with heroin. There is a process that people go through from the desire to use all the way through the process of acquisition, and then sitting around in a room together, cooking it down and injecting it. When you remove that ritual from people, when you take the ritual out, if heroin were to be available in clinics where people could go into a very cold, white-walled room with a table, sitting by themselves, and be supplied their heroin and do the injection, you have taken the ritual out of it. And I will try to dig up the studies and get them into the low bar for people. But what they have found is if you intervene in the ritual, if you rob people of the ritual, drug use plummets. I don't mean a little bit, I mean it goes way down, because you've taken away part of the identity associated with that drug when you take the rituals away. And by legalizing drugs, I don't mean decriminalize them, I mean legalizing drugs. And I'm standing with Paul on this completely. Look, crystal meth, man, that's a fucked up drug. It is a fucked up drug. Go Google some pictures, some before and after pictures of people that are strung out on crystal meth, and tell me that anybody in their right mind would even do this shit to begin with. But what we do know is that if you can take away the ritual associated with it, there's two profound effects that happen. One, you eliminate the black market. You don't have a bunch of cartel members and gangsters out there dealing drugs and killing people and having wars with each other and creating an underground economy that hurts the tax structure, the tax structure and the financing of everything we do in life. You take that away. They have no more power because they can't compete. What, heroin costs like, what, $25 a silo in order to manufacture, and that sells for however many hundreds of grams, depending on the purity on the street. When you take away that part, you take away the black market element, and you take away the organized crime aspect, it just poof, disappears. No more, because people can get the drugs without paying outrageous amounts of money. And you allow addicts to go in and use, but don't allow them, don't put them 5 in a room together. Don't allow them any kind of socialization with that. So if you want to use heroin, here's what you do. You report to this clinic at this time per day. You will be escorted to a room where you will sit by yourself, no television, nothing but white walls, and you will be allowed to do your heroin there. You do that, and heroin use will drop like a prom dress. And we need to have that kind of approach and mentality. And the same thing could be happening with crystal meth. When you rob people of the ritual, you rob people a lot of the enjoyment that they get out of using the drug. And then while you have them in that controlled environment, lo and behold, you have an opportunity to stop them on the way in and way out and say, by the way, the money that we make from selling you this stuff, we also have counseling services available. If you want to talk to somebody about ending this lifestyle and getting out, it's a beautiful way to intervene on hard drug use, on any kind of drug use. And we won't allow it to happen here in the United States or most of the Western world because of Puritan attitudes of, what do you mean you're going to give people cheap drugs? And well, I don't care if it ends up with 1/10 of the people using drugs. I don't care if it saves 10,000 lives a year. I don't want anybody to get high. So we'll keep it illegal. We'll make sure more people get high. We'll make sure more people die. We'll make sure that we have a mafia. We'll make sure that we have cartels and that there's gang violence and everything else that goes with it. We'll maintain the rivers of blood just so we can fucking feel sanctimonious about having drugs illegal. And it is time for this kind of insanity to stop. I just don't think we can afford it anymore.
Then, just while you were talking about that, I should have remembered this earlier, but there is a safe injecting room in King's Cross in Sydney. It's been trialled for several years now. I think 2010. And I'm just reading about it here, and it's been so successful at harm minimum. It's a harm reduction policy. So for a start, it's led to a huge drop in overdoses. So it's saving people's lives at the very least. And there's also calls to open a second injecting room now. So it does work. It's obviously not comfortable for some people to think about that by some way that allowing this to happen, you're condoning it. That's not the case at all. You're minimizing the risk that people are going to when they do this. And just about the whole prohibition thing, you brought up the Second Amendment. So the way I link it into that really tenuously is that there's billions of guns in America. There's enough guns for every man, woman, and child. 6 times over? Something ridiculous. So if the right to bear arms was so shit, and there's all these guns everywhere, why the hell aren't there millions of gun deaths every year in America? Why aren't people blowing each other up left, right, and center with guns? They don't do it. So something in there that's what I always use as an argument for pro gun rights. It's like, well, something's working somewhere in the country because it's not the Wild West. Something good is happening, and I think that it's a similar thing with drugs and prohibition on drugs. The more you clamp down and the more you treat people like idiots and deprive them of freedom, they're going to behave like idiots. You know, that's what happens. Freedom of expression, or freedom to do whatever you want, as long as it's not harming yourself or harming others, which drugs can do. But allowing people to fuck up and make mistakes, and maybe, you know, there's people out there that fuck up and become better people for it. I don't know. But to say, no, you cannot do this, and we're gonna throw you in prison because you're doing something that we don't like, we can't think of more of a reason than that, except that, you know, like you say, everything that we do to fight the drugs causes death, it causes war on the streets, it causes gang wars, it causes people to run the risk of going through airports with fucking substances in condoms that burst and kill them through airports. All of these things, we're gonna do all of these things because drugs are bad and we want to stop drugs. You're never ever gonna fucking stop them in the first place. And that's the other uncomfortable thing that people don't want to accept. So there are things that happen in the world that are always going to happen, whether you like them or not. And so the idea that you can stop them is just completely unrealistic and often causes more harm than just accepting that, well, shit's going to happen from time to time.
You know, I have the same approach to abortion rights. I am not a fan of abortion. On a personal standpoint, I think it's a tragedy. It is, to me, an ending of a life. But do I want to criminalize abortions when women have been getting abortions throughout history, and even, I mean, some really, really, really rank ways to get it done before we had technology to have it done right? You're going to have people getting abortions, folks. You could rail about it all you want. The only question is, to me, and for me, it was a moral question. Do I want some 15, 16-year-old girl that made a mistake and got pregnant to go somewhere back alley and to get something that may destroy her chance of ever having children again, or in fact kill her or maim her in some way? No. You have to treat some problems as a matter of damage control. That's all you can do. There will always be drug abuse. There is no way to stop it. There's never been a way to stop it. Mao tried to, well, Mao, I guess, came closer than anybody. He just drug them out of their house and put a bullet in the back of their head. And if you kill, I don't know, 20, 30 million people, you'll probably get a whole lot of the drug addicts.
Put a dent in it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that will scare some of other people away from using drugs too. But unless we're prepared to go the way of Mao, you're not going to control drugs with laws, because, I mean, just look at the reality today. We've been waging a war on drugs since the Reagan administration foolishly started it. And gee, let's really stop drugs in America, because God knows you can't buy any weed or heroin or cocaine in the United States. It's just not around. People just said no. No, of course, that's silly. We have to look at this as damage control. If you look at, compare it to alcohol. In the 1930s, 20s, we had prohibition. There were blood in the streets. The gang wars took over. People were getting gunned down, I mean, in droves. It was horrible. And guess what? People still drank. They brought in liquor from Canada. They made liquor here in the United States. They made poisonous, toxic bathtub gin and sold it. People died, but people drank anyway. Now we have alcohol, which admittedly does a lot of damage to people. I mean, 30,000 plus die on the roads from drunk drivers. Of course, I'm not blaming alcohol for that. That falls in the lap of drunk drivers. But we have people that get esophageal varices, malnutrition, they get cirrhosis of the liver, any number of other disorders that are related to excessive drinking, and that is the cause of legal booze. But we also have it distributed in trucks to legitimate retail outlets, outfits across the United States every day without anybody getting shot. And it's delivered at an affordable price, because we have accepted that even though there's downsides to alcohol, including alcoholism, we've decided that trying to keep it illegal causes more harm than good. We figured that out. Prohibition against cannabis and all other drugs, in my opinion, because I'll say flat out, I would make them all legal. I might have controls on how they were delivered and distributed. I would certainly opt for stripping away the rituals that go with it. I would not have people enjoying heroin parties or everybody getting together and shooting heroin. If you want to go shoot heroin, you go do it by yourself. You do it with a clean needle, which might help, by the way, reduce the spread of AIDS and hepatitis. But, you know, God, little AIDS and hepatitis is all good in the name of.
But that's the bad. That's the bad AIDS, though, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Bad AIDS is okay. Good AIDS is the one we've got to be careful about.
Yes, exactly. You know, if you get AIDS from using a dirty needle, hey, man, at least you didn't get gay AIDS. I mean, I'm sorry. The biggest problem here, I think George Carlin said it best, is that here's the problem with society. You figure the average stupidity of people, and then start thinking that half of them are even stupider than that. Some of those people get in to run our government, and do things like Tammy Faye and Tammy Bruce and Calvina Faye. We have a serious drug problem in the United States, and its name is the war on drugs. It is killing more people than drugs kill by far. It is causing more damage than drugs cause by far. There is no moral, legal, or rational justification to declare war. I mean, look at the feminists. They've declared war on masculinity. Look how well that's going. Uh, uh, and masculinity isn't any worse than marijuana. As a matter of fact, I think it's, for a lot of people, a good thing to have around. But with that, I think I'm about talked out on this, Paul. I mean, it's something I think as addiction specialists that you and I needed to address on here. We needed to talk about. What I do know is that even though recidivism's high, that you can help people with drug problems if you create an environment where help is attractive. If you keep them in an environment where we're basically treating people for being evil, which is what a lot of drug use treatment is now, is trying to teach people not to be evil, then, oh, shock of shocks, that doesn't work too well. But if you bring people into a welcoming, honoring environment where we honor their dignity, where we don't treat them that they are a disease waiting to be cured, then I'll wager you'll have a lot more sex, Freudian slip there. You will have a lot more success with those people when it comes to recidivism than you will by criminalizing them and throwing them into environments that are just hotbeds of violence and drug use. Call me crazy, but that's what I think.
Yeah, I think that's true, and also this is a men's issue, because when it comes down to the sticky end of what's the word I'm looking for, sentencing, guys get far heavier sentences for the same crime as a woman does. So decriminalizing or legalizing this would help men more than it would help women, because women don't suffer the consequences in society as much as men anyway.
And you know, when it comes to drugs, I'm sort of all for that, because I would like to see everybody quit suffering legal consequences for drug use. You know, we could literally almost empty out our prisons. Right now, I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but I know they're there. Somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the prison population are nonviolent drug offenders. Another big chunk of people are those who didn't pay child support or couldn't pay child support. If we practice some sanity with our criminal justice system, we could take care of the deficit. But as a society, we're too stupid to do that.
Yeah, I mean, but it's it's one of those things that, you know, the government, it's one of those powers that they don't use wisely enough, and it's when a government deprives someone of their freedom, puts them in incarceration, you've got to have a fucking good reason to do that. There should be no regime anywhere around the world that should be able to do that just because people are doing something you might not like. That's not good enough reason. It has to be so much. The test has to be so much more than that. I don't think drugs pass that test at all.
No, they don't. And when your Constitution contains nice little expressions, little platitudes like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you might think that kicking somebody's door in with a SWAT team because they've got a bag of weed on their living room table is a little bit in contradiction to that concept. Oh my God, we could go on about this a long time, but we have run out of time. We have done our deal for tonight. And we will be back next week. In the meantime, I want to remind you that if you would like to support this work through the Air for Men Patreon page, there is a link in the low bar. Also, if you're in Australia or really anywhere else in the world and you would like to consider personal services, form of online coaching from somebody like Paul Beatty, his URL is in the low bar to this video. And what's the name of that URL, Paul?
It is Support for Guys, for guys.com.
Support for Guys. Imagine that, man. That's sacrilege. The URL is sacrilege, man. They gotta hate this guy.
Why do you only cancel guys? Because because that's just what I do. That's the easy answer to that one.
Excuse me, Paul, what exactly do you mean by support for guys? I mean, I don't get that. What's up with that shit?
Why don't you counsel women? Because I haven't been in university long enough to figure out all the spaghetti in women's heads. That's why.
Also, Paul covers things like addictions, anxiety, depression, other matters, other life problems that are so common to the lives of men, particularly modern men. They've reached epidemic proportions. You can also visit me at anearformen.com. I also provide services along the same line. We both work on Skype and on telephone. Also, I understand, has a walk-in practice as well. Is that correct, Paul?
Yeah, that's based in Sydney. So yeah, I've got
okay,
an office
in Sydney. So if you're fortunate enough, if you're unfortunate enough to be going through some life struggles and you're fortunate enough to live in Sydney, you can go see Paul in person. That's a good thing. But with that, a little bit about next week. We're both going to try a little bit of an experiment here that I'm looking forward to. 5 warning flags for bitch alert. And what we pledged to do with this is that Paul's going to come up with his 5 warning flags for having encountered a bitch that is poised to destroy your life at any moment. And I'm going to come up with my 5. And we're going to take turns. We are not going to share this with each other in the meantime. We're going to come into this blind, and we'll have a contest. Let's say, I don't know, whoever comes with the best bitch warning flag gets the booby prize. Who knows? Something like that. But
they're going to be sort of small, sort of subtle, you know. They're just, you know, things that just a little red flag, you know, not big obvious things, you know.
Yes, yes, and let's take a moment just to prepare people for that, guys. If she just told you she fucked your brother, there was 1,000 little flags before that. They were there. You just didn't see them. You don't need to get a divorce paper saying that you abused your children is not a small, subtle flag. What we're trying to do is help you understand the subtle flags before you get to the big ones, because the big ones are life-changing. Small flags and that are deal breakers are things that you can do something about right then with a minimum of consequences. But what Paul is saying here, and he's absolutely right by saying we're talking about subtle ones, we're talking about the ones that if you choose to think logically, and if you choose to think in your own best self-interest, you can get out of that situation when the small flags are there before the great big knife gets shoved in your back. I mean, if you want a Crocodile Dundee special in between your ribs and the back, you go for it, guy, but you don't have to get there. But you've got to be willing to pay attention to the small stuff. And so we'll have a total of 10 next week. Some of them may overlap. I have a suspicion that 1 or 2 of them might. But that's going to be the program for next week. It's going to be 10 warning signs for you to get the fuck out. And no other bones about it. With that, Paul, do you got anything else you'd like to say before we boot off for tonight?
No, I think I'm not going to follow anything. Once you bring George Carlin into the conversation, then I can't. I've got nothing.
Yeah. I use George when I don't have anything else to say because he says it better than I would have to begin with. Okay, well, with that, I want to wish everybody a good night, and we will see you here next week at the same time for Better Call Pauls. So take care, everybody, and bye-bye to you.